A stone road vanishes beneath a bog, hiding a secret for thousands of years. These forest-submerged causeways are not just old paths. They are the forgotten fingerprints of a sophisticated regional power that once commanded the landscape. By the end of this journey, you will know the identity of this lost society and how they built an empire hidden in plain sight. Why would a civilization deliberately sink its most vital roads? And what catastrophic event caused their entire world to disappear from history? What does it feel like to walk in the footsteps of a ghost? A quiet forest floor holds a secret underfoot. That spongy mat of moss and peat, which seems so natural and untamed, conceals a carefully laid stone road, a causeway deliberately built to be submerged. These are not the grand highways of later empires, visible for all to see. They are hidden infrastructure, and their concealment is the very source of their power. To understand them, we must step into a different world, a landscape shaped by water and wood. In places like Ireland's Say-eyed fields or the bogs of Scotland, entire prehistoric territories were organized around these sunken routes. Why would a society invest immense labor to quarry stone, transport it, and painstakingly pave a road only to let a bog swallow it? The answer begins with the environment itself. Thousands of years ago, the climate was cooler and wetter. Vast tracts of land were waterlogged, creating a challenging mosaic of firm ground and impassable marsh. A simple dirt path would have been washed away or become a muddy quagmire. A stone causeway, however, provided a permanent, reliable passage through this difficult terrain. It was a practical solution to a fundamental problem, but it was also something far more strategic. These roads were the ancient equivalent of a controlled access highway. They did not wander aimlessly, they connected specific, vital points of interest. A causeway might lead directly from an area of high, defensible ground, where a chieftain's settlement stood, straight to a prized quarry of fine stone, or to a sacred grove used for important gatherings. By controlling the road, the leaders of this society controlled the movement of people, goods, and ideas. They decided who could travel, what could be traded, and where armies could march. The bog was not an obstacle to them, it was a moat, and these submerged causeways were their drawbridges, allowing them to project their influence across a landscape that would have otherwise been fractured and disconnected. So the mystery deepens from a simple question of engineering to one of social control. What kind of leadership could orchestrate such a widespread, coordinated building project? And what happened to make them vanish so completely that we only find their roads by accident, preserved in the very mud they sought to conquer? The true scale of this vanished power only becomes clear when you step back and look at the map. These hidden roads are not lonely footpaths. They form a vast, interconnected web stretching across entire regions. From the waterlogged plains of Ireland, known by the old term toghers, to the causewayed enclosures found throughout Britain, a distinct pattern emerges. This was not a collection of isolated villages solving local problems. This was a coordinated system. Imagine a single stone road, perhaps 2 or 3 meters wide, snaking for several kilometers through a treacherous bog. Now multiply that image by dozens, by hundreds. Each one was a deliberate line drawn across the landscape, connecting islands of high, dry ground where communities lived to distant places that held immense value. Some causeways led directly to sources of special stone, perfect for making tools or weapons. Others pointed toward sites we believe were used for important gatherings and ceremonies. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to build in the most challenging environments possible? The answer is strategy. Building a reliable road through a trackless swamp or a dense forest is an immense undertaking. It requires a clear plan, a steady supply of materials, and a large, organized workforce. This was not a job for a single family or a small clan. The sheer scale of labor involved, the kilometers of stone that had to be quarried, transported, and laid by hand, points to a central authority with the power to command that labor from many different communities. This suggests a society with a clear hierarchy, with leaders who could see the big picture. They understood that by controlling these vital arteries, they controlled everything. They could move their own people and goods safely and efficiently, while making it incredibly difficult for outsiders or rival groups to navigate the same territory. The bog was their fortress wall, and these submerged causeways were the heavily guarded gates. So the mystery of the roads leads us directly to the mystery of the builders. Who were these master organizers, these unseen architects of a sunken empire? These roads were not simple piles of rubble. To endure for millennia under the relentless pressure of water and peat, they had to be masterpieces of engineering. The builders began not with stone but with wood, laying down a foundation of logs across the soft, unstable ground. This created a stable platform that would not simply sink. On top of this, they meticulously placed layers of stone, often starting with larger, flatter slabs at the base and finishing with a carefully fitted surface of smaller stones or even gravel, creating a surprisingly smooth and durable walking path. This was not haphazard work. It was a precise, multi-stage process that required a deep, practical understanding of local materials and the unique challenges of a waterlogged landscape. They were, in effect, early masters of drainage, constructing roads that actively managed the water around them rather than being destroyed by it. Such sophisticated techniques could not have been invented on the spot by a single community. This points to a specialized body of knowledge developed and refined over generations. It suggests the existence of skilled artisans, perhaps even guilds of road builders, who possessed secrets of construction passed from teacher to apprentice. This level of organization forces us to ask a critical question. Was this the work of a centralized state, a single powerful authority that could deploy these skilled teams wherever they were needed? Or was it a network of local chieftains, all agreeing to a common standard and a shared vision for the land? The evidence in the stones themselves leans toward a remarkable degree of coordination. The causeways do not simply follow the easiest path. Many are aligned with striking precision, not just toward practical destinations like hilltop settlements, but also with celestial events. A road might be laid out to point directly toward the sunrise on a significant day of the year, or to frame a particular sacred mountain on the horizon. This tells us that for these people, practicality and cosmology were woven together. A journey was not just a physical movement from one place to another, it was a passage through a landscape imbued with spiritual meaning. The road was both a functional tool and a ceremonial pathway. By reverse engineering their construction methods, we are not just learning how they moved stones. We are glimpsing the intellectual capacity of a lost society, a culture that combined sharp observational skills with a deep, symbolic understanding of their world. Their true motivation, however, remains locked within the landscape, a secret waiting to be uncovered in the very places they chose to connect. But what drove such an immense investment of labor and ingenuity? Why build roads meant to be swallowed by the earth? The answers lie in the multiple roles these causeways played, revealing a society of remarkable sophistication. One of the most compelling theories points to trade. Imagine a trader carrying precious goods, perhaps blocks of vital salt or gleaming nuggets of copper, needing to cross a vast, trackless bog. A submerged stone road would have been a lifeline, a guaranteed route for moving high-value commodities across an otherwise impassable landscape. This was not local barter, it was organized commerce, suggesting a network that stretched far beyond the immediate territory. Yet other roads seemed to lead away from the practical and toward the profound. Many causeways point directly to sites we believe were sacred, like ancient groves or ceremonial gathering places. These were not just paths for feet, but pathways for the spirit, used for processions during seasonal festivals or for journeys to honor ancestors. The very act of walking this sunken, hidden road may have been a symbolic descent, a transition from the ordinary world into a space of ritual and meaning. This dual purpose, both economic and spiritual, points to a leadership that seamlessly blended worldly power with sacred authority. They controlled not just what people traded, but what they believed. The decision to submerge these roads was equally strategic. Keeping the primary routes hidden within the bog protected them from erosion, ensuring their longevity. More importantly, it kept them secret. An invading force would see only an impassable morass, unaware of the solid highways lying just beneath the surface. This was a form of defensive camouflage, a way to control movement and protect valuable assets from outsiders. The multifunctionality of these causeways is the final, telling clue. They were trade routes, pilgrimage paths, and defensive structures all at once. This reflects a complex governance structure, a society capable of balancing economic, religious, and military priorities with a single, coordinated vision. To walk these roads was to participate in the very heartbeat of this lost power, moving to the rhythm of its markets, its rituals, and its secrets. The stones themselves seem to whisper of a deeper purpose. Look beyond the practical engineering, and you find a landscape inscribed with meaning. For the people who built them, these causeways were more than just roads, they were bridges between worlds. In many ancient traditions, particularly those of Celtic Europe, wetlands and bogs were considered liminal spaces, thresholds where the physical realm met the spiritual. To build a solid, enduring path across such a place was a profound act. It was a declaration of humanity's ability to create order in chaos, to forge a tangible connection with the divine, the ancestral, and the cosmic. This was not merely about crossing a marsh, it was about traversing the boundary between the everyday and the eternal. This symbolic intent is carved into the very alignment of the roads. Many causeways are not pointed toward the most direct route. Instead, they are carefully oriented to frame the rising sun on the summer solstice, or to point directly at a lone, sacred mountain on the horizon. This reveals a society that lived by a celestial calendar, one where the cycles of the sun and stars were woven directly into their most fundamental infrastructure. The road was a clock and a compass made of stone, guiding people not only through space, but through time itself, marking the seasons for planting, for harvest, and for ceremony. Such a deeply symbolic world, you naturally reinforced the power of the ruling class, the ability to commission these projects, to demonstrate a command over both the labor of communities and the very forces of nature, would have been a powerful display of authority. The leaders were not just chieftains, they were likely spiritual figures, priests or druids who could interpret the will of the gods and the movements of the heavens. By building these cosmic pathways, they positioned themselves as the essential intermediaries between the people and the powers that shaped their world. Their governance was likely a form of theocracy, where political power was inseparable from perceived spiritual connection. This symbolic layer adds immense depth to our understanding, transforming these submerged roads from simple engineering feats into the sacred texts of a lost civilization. They are a physical manifestation of a complex belief system, a worldview where every journey had a spiritual dimension. Yet, such profound cultural expressions required a solid foundation in the real world. The immense resources needed to build and maintain this symbolic network point to a thriving, productive society, one with a robust economic engine capable of supporting grand visionary projects. What kind of wealth sustained this spiritual empire, and where did it all go when the world these roads connected suddenly fell silent? The wealth that built these cosmic pathways was not spiritual alone. It was grounded in a thriving, tangible economy, and the evidence for this is scattered along the submerged routes themselves. Archaeologists sifting through the peat have uncovered more than just stone. They have found the remnants of ancient commerce. Shards of finely made pottery, whose clay composition points to origins hundreds of kilometers away, tell a story of long-distance exchange. Fragments of metal, perhaps a copper axe head or a bronze ornament, speak of access to rare materials and the skilled artisans who worked them. Even the subtle traces of pollen and seeds preserved in the bog paint a picture of organized agriculture, with staple crops being moved along these hidden highways to feed a dispersed population. These causeways were the supply lines of a regional power, facilitating the steady flow of both luxury items and everyday necessities. Control over this network was the ultimate source of influence. The ruling class likely held the power to levy tolls on goods traveling their roads, taxing the prosperity they enabled. They could also monopolize the trade in certain high-value commodities, like salt for preserving food or specific types of stone for making elite tools. This concentrated wealth would have flowed upward, funding the very institutions that reinforced their authority, from maintaining a protective force to sponsoring the elaborate ceremonies held at the sacred sites the roads connected. The economic system and the spiritual world were two sides of the same coin, each strengthening the other. The ability to commission a road aligned with the solstice sunrise was a power derived not just from faith, but from a firm grip on the region's resources. By tracing the origins of these trade goods, we can begin to map the astonishing reach of this lost society. A piece of pottery from a distant coast, or a style of metalwork unique to another valley, acts as a proxy for their political and economic influence. It suggests a web of alliances and trade partnerships that extended far beyond the immediate boglands. This was not an isolated culture, but a connected hub, a central node in a much wider network. The submerged causeways were the local infrastructure that plugged this regional power into the broader currents of prehistoric Europe. They were the on-ramps to an ancient interstate, allowing ideas, innovations, and wealth to flow into the heartland, fueling a cultural golden age. Yet, such complex and interconnected systems are often the most fragile. The very prosperity that built this network may have contained the seeds of its own undoing, setting the stage for a collapse that would echo for millennia. What external shock or internal failure could have caused such a well-organized world to simply vanish, leaving only its sunken roads as a monument to its passing? The silent earth has begun to speak, its voice preserved in the deep, cold peat of places like Ireland's Corlea bog. Here, a massive oak trackway lies submerged, a road so expertly built that its precise joinery and deliberate alignment remain clearly visible even after more than 2,000 years. Scientific analysis dates its construction to the year 148 before the Common Era, a time when this society's organizational powers were at their peak. The scale is breathtaking, with immense logs carefully notched and fitted together, forming a solid pathway wide enough for people and goods to travel in safety across the treacherous bog. This was not a simple footpath, it was a monumental undertaking, a public work that demanded a unified vision and a vast, coordinated labor force. Each perfectly shaped timber is a testament to a culture that had mastered its environment, not through force, but through sophisticated understanding and planning. Far older and no less impressive is the Sweet Track in England, a causeway built nearly 6,000 years ago. Its construction around 3,800 before the Common Era reveals an even earlier spark of this genius, showing that the principles of this complex engineering were being refined and applied for millennia. Walking its length, preserved by the very water that sought to claim it, is to walk in the footsteps of the very first architects of this hidden world. The artifacts found along these routes are like whispers from the past. A worn leather shoe dropped and lost in the muck tells a personal story of a journey taken. A finely crafted wooden tool, perhaps left by the builders themselves, speaks to the skill of their craft. On rare occasions, more ceremonial objects are uncovered, items that may have been offered to the spirits of the bog, transforming the road from a mere transport route into a sacred passage. These personal remnants are the human counterpoint to the grand scale of the engineering, reminding us that this was a living network, used by individuals with their own hopes and destinations. To date these incredible structures, scientists turn to the timeless rhythms of nature itself. Dendrochronology, the study of tree ring patterns, can pinpoint the exact year a tree was felled to build a road like the one at Corlea. Radiocarbon dating provides a broader chronological anchor for sites without preserved wood, allowing researchers to correlate the boom in causeway construction with periods of cultural fluorescence and regional consolidation. Each carefully excavated artifact, each precisely dated timber, adds another crucial piece to the puzzle. They prove that these submerged roads were the very arteries of a connected society, binding scattered communities into a cohesive and powerful whole. The meticulous work of archaeologists does more than just catalog ancient objects. It slowly and patiently reassembles the story of a people, bringing us face to face with the sophisticated minds who envisioned this sunken network. Yet this tangible evidence also raises a haunting final question. If they were so advanced, so deeply rooted in their landscape, what could have possibly caused such a well-established world to fade into silence, leaving its greatest achievements hidden beneath the moss and water? Their genius was not in conquering the bog, but in collaborating with it. This mastery of the environment is the seventh and perhaps most revealing clue to their identity. These builders possessed an intimate, almost intuitive understanding of the land, reading the subtle language of water and earth to construct roads that would last for millennia. They did not fight the wetlands, they worked with their unique properties, turning a potential weakness into their greatest strategic strength. The materials they chose were not imported from distant quarries, they were sourced directly from the landscape the roads would traverse. For the foundational layer, they selected trees like birch and alder, woods known for their natural resistance to rot in waterlogged conditions. These logs were laid horizontally across the softest ground, creating a flexible, stable base that would not simply be swallowed by the peat. On top of this wooden framework, they carefully placed stones gathered from local fields and streams, creating a durable, well-drained surface that could withstand the constant pressure of seasonal flooding and the relentless growth of the bog itself. This was not brute force engineering, it was a sophisticated adaptation, a dialogue between human need and environmental reality. Climate data extracted from deep peat cores adds a dramatic layer to this story. The evidence suggests that many of these causeways were constructed during periods of unusually wet weather, when normally passable landscapes were becoming increasingly submerged. This was not a random act of construction, it was a deliberate, timely response to a changing world. While other societies might have retreated in the face of rising waters, this culture doubled down on its investment, building the very infrastructure that would allow it to thrive while others faltered. Their ability to maintain mobility and economic connections during climatic stress was a profound source of their power and longevity. It allowed them to control the flow of resources when they were most scarce and most valuable. This deep environmental wisdom likely stemmed from a blend of practical necessity and spiritual belief. To live so closely with the bog was to understand its cycles and its spirits. The wetland was not a wasteland to be drained, but a living, powerful entity to be respected and navigated with care. This sustainable approach stands in stark contrast to other ancient empires that often exploited their landscapes until the resources were exhausted. The builders of the submerged causeways present a different model, one of resilience through adaptation. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the most enduring forms of power are not always about domination, but about understanding how to build a civilization that moves in rhythm with the world around it. The straight, unyielding lines of a Roman road tell a story of conquest and control. Laid down to move legions and tax carts with maximum efficiency, they are monuments to a central imperial will. The forest-submerged causeways, however, sing a different song entirely. They twist and turn not out of inefficiency, but to embrace the landscape, to connect with a sacred spring, or to align with a celestial event. This fundamental difference in purpose points to a fundamentally different kind of power. Where Rome built to dominate, the causeway builders built to belong. Another fascinating parallel lies high in the Andes with the incredible road network of the Inca. Like our bog builders, the Inca were masters of difficult terrain, carving stone pathways across impossible mountain peaks. Their system, too, was a marvel of engineering that connected a vast territory. But the Inca roads were the arteries of a tightly centralized state, with a god-emperor at its heart and a rigid administrative system that managed every facet of life from a single capital. A message could travel thousands of miles along these roads with relentless, top-down speed. The causeways of ancient Europe suggest a different political reality. The very fact that they are submerged, hidden, and adapted to local spiritual landmarks implies a power structure that was more federated, a network of allied communities or regional chieftains who shared a common culture and a common need for connectivity, but who may not have answered to a single, all-powerful ruler. This was likely a power of consensus and shared ritual, not of imperial decree. Comparing these ancient networks helps us see the unique political fingerprint left by the causeway builders. They achieved a remarkable scale of regional integration without the apparent need for the heavy, centralized bureaucracy of Rome or Cusco. Their authority was woven into the land itself, expressed through the shared labor of road building and the shared belief in the sacred paths they created. This decentralized model raises a profound question about the nature of their collapse. If their power was not held in a single, vulnerable capital or reliant on a single ruler, what could have shattered such a deeply rooted and resilient network of communities? The sheer scale of these hidden highways forces us to ask who could command such a workforce. Laying kilometers of stone through treacherous bogs was not a casual community effort. It was a monumental undertaking that required a political engine. This was the work of a coordinated regional power, perhaps a powerful kingdom of chieftains or a confederation of tribes bound by a shared vision. Without written records, their governance remains a shadow, but the roads themselves are its physical manifesto. They speak of leaders who could mobilize hundreds, if not thousands, of people to labor on projects that served a grand, collective purpose. This authority likely flowed not from the point of a sword, but from the power of tradition and ritual. A ruler's legitimacy may have been rooted in an oral history, in a perceived connection to the ancestors and the gods of the land. The act of building the causeway itself could have been a sacred duty, a ritual that reinforced the leader's role as the mediator between the people and the cosmic order. The roads were more than infrastructure, they were a form of social glue. Mandating that communities work together to build them would have forged a shared identity and a sense of common purpose across a dispersed population. This created a powerful feedback loop where the leader who commissioned the road demonstrated their authority, and the successful completion of the road in turn strengthened that very authority for the next project. We see echoes of this political geography in the landscape itself. Many of these submerged causeways lead directly to the imposing ramparts of hill forts, which perched on high ground overlooking the territory. These were not just defensive strongholds, they were likely the seats of power, the administrative centers from which this regional influence radiated. The road was the tangible link between the ruler on the hill and the far-flung communities in the valleys and bogs below. It allowed for the movement of messengers, the collection of tribute or tolls, and the swift deployment of a protective force if needed. This suggests a sophisticated model of governance that balanced local autonomy with regional cooperation. Individual communities probably managed their own daily affairs, but they came together under a shared leadership for large-scale endeavors that benefited all, from road building to coordinated defense. This decentralized structure offered remarkable resilience, as the society was not dependent on a single, vulnerable capital. The power was woven into the very land, a network of alliances and obligations cemented by shared labor and a common spiritual worldview. Unraveling this political tapestry allows us to finally glimpse the architects of this sunken network, not as mythical figures, but as pragmatic yet visionary leaders who understood that true power lies in connection. Their authority was literally set in stone, guiding their people through a landscape they had mastered both physically and spiritually. The stone did not merely lead to a settlement or a marketplace. Often it guided travelers toward something less tangible, yet far more powerful. Many of these submerged causeways point unerringly toward sites of profound religious importance, from the stark silhouettes of stone circles to the quiet dignity of ancient burial mounds. These were not casual destinations. The road itself became a ceremonial pathway, a prescribed route for ritual processions during sacred festivals or for solemn journeys to honor ancestors. The very act of walking this hidden, sunken path may have been a symbolic descent, a transition from the mundane world into a space charged with spiritual meaning. Along these routes, archaeologists have uncovered quiet testaments to this devotional use, carefully placed objects, left not as lost items but as intentional deposits, speak volumes. A finely crafted weapon, perhaps a ceremonial axe, might be found resting in the peat near a causeway's edge. Collections of animal bones, showing signs of a specific ceremonial practice, suggest shared meals or offerings made to secure the favor of unseen forces. These were not roads in the modern sense, they were sacred corridors. This deep intertwining of infrastructure and belief reveals the ultimate source of the ruler's authority. Commissioning and maintaining these vital spiritual arteries was likely seen as a sacred duty, a necessary service to the community and the gods. The leaders who organized the labor were not just administrators, they were likely spiritual figures, priests or druids who acted as essential intermediaries between the people and the cosmic order. Their political power was legitimized through this perceived divine connection. By building the road to the sacred spring, they demonstrated their unique role as the guardians of tradition and the interpreters of the will of the gods. This fusion of the practical and the profound created an incredibly resilient social fabric. The shared labor of building and maintaining the causeways reinforced social cohesion, binding scattered communities together in a common, holy purpose. Their collective identity was literally paved in stone, every journey a reaffirmation of their shared beliefs and their place in a spiritually ordered world. To understand this is to see beyond the engineering and into the heart of the civilization. The stones were not just for feet, they were for the spirit, guiding a society whose every step was part of a larger, sacred dance. This ritual landscape, so carefully constructed, was inevitably woven into the stories they told about themselves, their origins, and their gods, leaving echoes that would ripple through their mythology for generations. The stones themselves may be silent, but the stories are not. Long after the builders vanished, their submerged roads lived on in the whispers of folklore, transforming from physical pathways into the stuff of legend. Across the boglands of Ireland and Britain, local tales speak of hidden paths known as ferry roads, routes that were said to belong to the otherworld and were to be avoided by the unwary. The uncanny correlation is that these storied ferry paths often trace the exact lines where archaeologists now uncover the ancient causeways. This is no mere coincidence, it is a powerful form of cultural memory. In the rich tapestry of Irish mythology, the otherworld was not a distant heaven, but a parallel realm that could be accessed through liminal spaces, with wetlands and bogs being prime portals. The causeways, these solid human-made roads deliberately sunk into such mystical ground, would have been naturally interpreted by later generations as bridges between worlds, physical proof of the old stories. They became the Shia paths, the routes of the Owls-Shi, the people of the mounds. To walk them without permission was to risk being spirited away forever. Oral histories passed down over countless generations often attribute these structures to legendary figures, to a race of giants or a tribe of god-like ancestors who shaped the land in a time before time. While we cannot read these stories as literal history, they are invaluable. They tell us how the landscape was perceived and how the immense, unexplained works of a lost people were rationalized and woven into a new cultural identity. The ferry road was a way to explain the inexplicable, to instill respect for a place that clearly held deep, ancient power. This mythological layer enriches the archaeological data, offering a glimpse into the lasting psychological impact of these structures. They were so imposing, so fundamentally woven into the land, that they could not be forgotten, only reinterpreted. They haunted the imagination long after their original purpose was lost. The memory of the builders themselves was preserved, not as engineers or chieftains, but as magical beings from a forgotten age. This fusion of myth and stone reveals a profound truth, that the legacy of this regional power was so potent it transcended its own collapse, embedding itself into the very soul of the region for millennia. To understand the tools that built such an enduring legacy, we must look past the stories and back to the physical evidence, to the simple, effective implements that turned a vision of a connected landscape into a reality. Their tools were extensions of their ingenuity, simple yet perfectly adapted to the immense task at hand. With antler picks, they levered stones from the earth, the durable tines providing a strong, natural pry bar. Heavy wooden mallets, carved from a single piece of hardwood, were used to drive stakes and compact the ground, while polished stone axes, meticulously shaped and sharpened, felled the trees needed for the foundational framework. Each tool was a product of its environment, chosen for its specific properties, and used with a skill that turned raw materials into a permanent path. The true brilliance, however, lay not just in the tools themselves, but in the sophisticated sequence of techniques they employed. Before a single stone was laid, they would prepare the soft, unstable ground. They created a stable base by laying down a dense mattress of brushwood, a technique that distributed weight and prevented the road from sinking into the peat. On top of this, they often placed a layer of split logs, laid side by side with the flat surface facing upward, creating a surprisingly smooth and durable walking surface. Some of the more advanced causeways even incorporated simple culverts, carefully placed channels that allowed water to flow beneath the road, preventing erosion and managing the very water that defined their landscape. This was not haphazard construction. It was a multi-stage process that demonstrated a deep, practical understanding of engineering and hydrology. The sheer scale of this work points to a highly organized labor force. This was not a project for a few individuals. It required a collective effort, likely organized through seasonal work parties where communities came together during quieter agricultural periods. In some cases, this labor may have been a form of corvée duty, a tax paid to the ruling elite not in goods, but in physical work on public projects. The ability to muster, feed, and direct such a workforce is a silent testament to the power and administrative reach of the society's leaders. The ultimate proof of their mastery is the roads themselves. The fact that many of these causeways remain intact, their structures still clearly defined after thousands of years, is a direct result of their skillful techniques and their thoughtful selection of materials. They chose woods like oak and alder for their resistance to rot, and specific types of stone that would not crack under constant moisture and pressure. Studying these methods does more than just reveal ancient engineering. It opens a window into their social world. Organizing a project of this magnitude required advanced planning, a clear chain of command, and the ability to allocate resources like food, tools, and manpower over long periods. This level of coordination speaks to a society with a clear vision and the collective will to imprint that vision upon the land. The craftsmanship preserved in the peat forces us to ask where they found the raw materials for such enduring monuments, and what the landscape itself can tell us about their choices. The choice of every timber and stone was a logistical triumph. To build a road that would last for millennia, the builders did not look to distant, exotic materials. They turned to the landscape at their feet, mastering its resources with an efficiency that speaks volumes about their organization. A causeway's foundation was often made from oak, a wood prized not for its beauty, but for its incredible resistance to rot in waterlogged conditions. When oak was not available, they expertly used alder or birch, species known to thrive in the very wetlands they were trying to cross. This was not a random selection. It was a deliberate strategy born from deep environmental wisdom. They understood the properties of the local forests intimately, choosing the right material for the right job to ensure their constructions would endure. This localized sourcing was a stroke of economic genius. By using timber from nearby woods and stone from local quarries, they avoided the back-breaking labor and immense time required to transport heavy materials over long distances. Imagine the effort saved by not having to haul massive oak logs for miles through a trackless bog. This efficiency minimized the overall cost of these monumental projects, allowing the society to build more with less strain on its people and its reserves. But such coordinated procurement could not have been left to chance. The consistent use of specific, high-quality materials across a wide region strongly suggests that the ruling authority controlled the supply chains. They likely held the power to designate certain oak groves as royal timber, or to commandeer the output from a particularly fine stone quarry. This control over resources was a fundamental pillar of their power. This system also points to a form of decentralized production. Individual communities living close to a forest or a rocky outcrop may have been tasked with preparing the materials as their contribution to the greater project. One village would season and shape the timber, while another would quarry and break the stone to a standard size. This created a supply network that was both efficient and socially binding, weaving different groups into a single, shared endeavor. The entire region functioned like a well-integrated economic engine, where local natural assets were systematically harnessed for collective infrastructure. This resourcefulness reveals a sophisticated logistical capability, a society that could plan not just for the construction itself, but for the entire chain of supply that made it possible. Their sustainable approach, using what the land provided without exhausting it, stands in stark contrast to the exploitative models of later empires. They built in harmony with their environment, and in doing so, created a legacy that the Earth itself would preserve. The success of this resource network allowed their ambitions to grow, leading to a vast expansion of the system whose timeline we are only just beginning to map. The story of these hidden roads is not etched into a single moment, but unfolds across a vast expanse of time. Radiocarbon dating and stratigraphic analysis have peeled back the layers, revealing that this network was not built in one grand campaign, but grew and evolved over centuries in distinct, identifiable phases. The earliest paths were likely simple, functional tracks, perhaps little more than cleared routes with a few scattered stones to mark a safe passage. These humble beginnings, however, laid the foundation for something far more ambitious. As centuries passed, these simple paths transformed. During the Bronze Age, we see a dramatic expansion and elaboration of the network. This was an era of growing populations, increased trade in metals and other valuable goods, and the consolidation of territorial control. The causeways became wider, more robust, and more numerous, reflecting a society at the peak of its organizational power, actively shaping its landscape to facilitate commerce and project its influence. This chronological layering acts like a historical barometer. A surge in construction during a specific period points to a time of prosperity and strong central leadership, when the ruling power could command the labor and resources for such monumental public works. Conversely, a lull in building activity or a shift in technique often corresponds with times of hardship. Later phases show clear adaptations to a changing environment, with roads being reinforced or rerouted in response to rising water levels, a testament to the society's resilience in the face of climatic shifts. By placing each timber and stone on a precise timeline, archaeologists can trace the heartbeat of this lost civilization. They can identify the peaks of its ambition and the quiet periods of its contraction, correlating these cycles with broader events across prehistoric Europe. This detailed chronology does more than just date the roads. It maps the dynamic life of the regional power that built them, setting the stage for the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. How did this intricate and long-lived society interact with the wider world, and what clues do those external relationships hold about its ultimate fate? A polished axe head, crafted from stone not found anywhere in the region, tells a silent story of a handshake across the water. These submerged causeways were not just for internal travel. They were the formal gateways through which this regional power engaged with the wider world. The discovery of artifacts along these routes, like distinctive bell beaker pottery from continental Europe, proves that trade and ideas flowed along these hidden highways. This was not an isolated society, but a connected player on a vast prehistoric stage. These external contacts would have been a double-edged sword. On one hand, they brought immense wealth and innovation. New metalworking techniques, advanced styles of pottery, and perhaps even novel agricultural methods could have been introduced through these exchanges, strengthening the ruling class and enriching the entire culture. The causeways ensured that these valuable commodities and knowledge reached the heartland, consolidating the power of those who controlled the routes. Yet with new connections came new challenges. Interactions with powerful neighbors would have involved delicate diplomacy, complex alliances, and the ever-present potential for conflict. A road that welcomed traders one season could, in the next, need to serve as a defensive line against a rival group. The strategic placement of many causeways, acting as boundaries between territories, suggests they were used to regulate movement, allowing friendly traffic while hindering potential rivals. This external pressure would have profoundly shaped the society's evolution. To maintain its status, the regional power had to adapt, perhaps militarizing certain routes or forming strategic partnerships to counter new threats from the continent. Later, even the distant shadow of the Roman Empire, with its insatiable appetite for expansion, would have been felt along these ancient pathways. The causeways thus become a lens through which we can map the entire political landscape. They show a society confident enough to engage with outsiders, yet shrewd enough to use its unique landscape as a buffer. Its power was defined not just by its internal unity, but by how it managed its place in a changing world. This delicate balance with external forces, so crucial to its rise, may have also contained the very seeds of its downfall. The intricate network did not fade slowly into obscurity. It appears to have met a definitive end. Why would a society so deeply invested in its hidden highways simply stop building them and eventually forget they were even there? The theories for this collapse are as layered as the peat that preserves the roads themselves. One of the most compelling explanations points to a changing climate. As conditions grew cooler and wetter over centuries, the bogs themselves began to expand at an accelerated rate. The very environment these engineers had so brilliantly mastered may have turned against them, swallowing not just the roads but the farmlands and settlements they connected, rendering entire regions uninhabitable. Another possibility lies in social upheaval. Were these communities fractured by internal conflict, a breakdown of the shared beliefs and leadership that had bound them together for generations? Or did new peoples arrive, perhaps with different technologies and a more aggressive approach to territorial control, overwhelming the decentralized power structure that the causeways represented? The archaeological record offers haunting clues. At some sites, researchers have found that the causeways were not merely abandoned. They were deliberately blocked with felled trees or even showed signs of having been burned, suggesting a period of unrest where the pathways themselves became targets. This was not a gentle forgetting, but an active severing of the connections that had defined a civilization. An equally powerful force of change may have been economic. With the expansion of the Roman Empire into northern Europe, new, straight roads were built on dry land, designed for the rapid movement of legions and imperial trade caravans. These new routes would have fundamentally redirected the flow of commerce and influence. Why struggle through a hidden bog track when a paved Roman highway offered faster, safer passage to larger markets? The old network, the pride of a regional power, may have simply become obsolete, its strategic advantage erased by a new continental system. Each of these theories, the environmental, the social, the economic, tells a different story about the fragility of human achievement. They remind us that even the most resilient and brilliantly adapted societies are not immune to the tides of change, whether from a shifting sky, a clash of cultures, or the simple, relentless march of progress. The silence that followed their decline was so complete that it would take a modern eye, armed with new tools and a persistent curiosity, to even notice the faint, straight lines hidden just beneath the forest floor. A straight line cutting across a modern field might look like a tractor track from the ground, but from the air it becomes a ghost. Aerial photography and LiDAR, a laser-based scanning technology, have become our time machines. By mapping the land's subtle contours, these tools strip away the forest canopy and peer through the soil to reveal the faint, geometric imprint of the causeways, patterns utterly invisible to someone standing right on top of them. This is how a local legend becomes a mapped coordinate. Once a potential site is identified, the delicate work begins. To avoid damaging these fragile structures, archaeologists first listen to the earth with ground-penetrating radar, sending pulses into the ground to create a sonogram of the buried past. This non-invasive peak confirms the road's presence and guides the careful hand-tool excavation that follows. The real race against time starts the moment organic materials like wood or leather are exposed to the air after millennia in the preservative peat. Every fragment must be kept wet and carefully conserved, or it will quickly crumble to dust, taking its secrets with it. The dating of these treasures has been revolutionized by methods like accelerator mass spectrometry, a form of radiocarbon dating so precise it can pinpoint the year a tree was cut down, allowing us to place these roads on a precise historical timeline. Yet for all this advanced technology, the human element remains irreplaceable. Many of the most important discoveries began not in a lab, but with a farmer noticing strange stones in a drained field or a hiker spotting an unnaturally straight ridge in a bog. This collaboration between local knowledge and scientific rigor is the heart of modern archaeology. It is a partnership that transforms a curious observation into a systematic study, building a collective understanding of this lost world one stone and one story at a time. But even with all these tools at our disposal, the most difficult task remains: how do we accurately interpret the silent testimony of a submerged stone and a preserved wooden tool? And what happens when the evidence itself seems to tell conflicting stories about the people who left it behind? Even the most carefully excavated stone cannot tell us its own story. Interpreting these submerged causeways is a complex puzzle where every clue is open to multiple readings. The evidence is often fragmentary, a single preserved section of a road that once stretched for kilometers, leaving us to guess at its full purpose and destination. Compounding this, the first written accounts of these landscapes come from much later periods, from Roman historians or medieval monks whose own cultural biases colored their observations of these ancient, unexplained structures. This inherent ambiguity fuels passionate debates among researchers. Was the primary function of the network economic, a practical system for moving trade goods? Or were these fundamentally religious pathways designed for ceremonial processions to sacred sites? Perhaps they were primarily political, tangible instruments of control for a ruling elite. Each perspective finds support in the physical record, suggesting the truth is not a single answer but a blend of all three. The very organization of the society is contested. One school of thought envisions a more decentralized culture, where individual communities built roads to connect with their neighbors through shared labor and mutual agreement. The consistency in style, they argue, could stem from a shared cultural tradition rather than a central command. Other scholars point to the immense scale and sophisticated engineering of the largest causeways as undeniable proof of a top-down hierarchy. They argue that only a powerful, centralized authority could have marshaled the resources and coordinated the labor across such a wide region. This central debate is complicated by the silent voices of the builders themselves. With no written records from their own time, we are left to interpret indirect clues, reading meaning into the alignment of a road or the artifacts dropped beside it. This necessary reliance on inference means that multiple competing theories can coexist, each supported by a compelling interpretation of the same stones. Preservation itself introduces another layer of uncertainty. While bogs wonderfully preserve organic materials like wood and leather, the acidic, waterlogged environment can also dissolve other evidence, such as bone or certain metals, creating a distorted picture of what was actually there. A causeway might appear to have a purely ceremonial function because all the everyday items used by travelers have simply vanished from the record. Rather than stalling progress, these lively debates enrich the entire field. They encourage an interdisciplinary approach, where archaeologists must collaborate with anthropologists to understand social structures, with environmental scientists to reconstruct ancient climates, and with engineers to analyze construction techniques. This collective effort ensures that no single assumption goes unchallenged. Embracing this uncertainty is not a sign of failure, but a recognition of the dynamic, living nature of historical investigation. The true cultural legacy of these structures may lie as much in the questions they continue to provoke as in the answers we have already unearthed. The stones did not simply vanish when the civilization that laid them down faded from memory. Their legacy was quietly absorbed by the cultures that followed, repurposed and reimagined for a new age. Throughout the medieval period, long after the original builders were gone, their sunken causeways were often the only reliable routes across still treacherous bogs. New roads were sometimes built directly on top of the ancient foundations, the old engineering providing a stable base for a new era of travel and trade. This practical recycling speaks to the sheer quality of the original work, an infrastructure so sound it remained the best solution for 1,000 years. Place names scattered across the landscape still hold echoes of these structures, with local towns and fields bearing titles that translate to the old road or the causeway meadow, a permanent, if subtle, inscription on the map. This enduring physical presence naturally wove itself into the fabric of local folklore and creative expression. The idea of a hidden path, a secret route known only to initiates, is a powerful and recurring theme in literature and art, from the fairy tales of old to modern fantasy epics. The concept resonates because it draws on a deep, almost ancestral memory of these very real submerged roads, transforming ancient infrastructure into a universal symbol of mystery, transition, and the promise of worlds just beyond our sight. This cultural absorption is the most profound evidence of their success. A society is not truly forgotten when its greatest works continue to guide feet, inspire stories, and name the land itself for centuries after its passing. Their identity may have been lost to time, but their influence was woven into the very DNA of the region, a silent partner in the building of everything that came after. To understand the full weight of this legacy, we must look at specific, tangible examples where the ghost of this lost power emerges from the peat with startling clarity. The silent, waterlogged earth of Corlea Bog holds one of the most eloquent statements of this lost power. Built in the year 148 before the Common Era, the Corlea Trackway is a road of immense oak planks laid with astonishing precision across a kilometer of treacherous wetland. This was not a simple footpath, it was a monumental timber highway, and its construction marks a moment of peak ambition. Each massive log was carefully hewn, notched, and fitted to its neighbor, creating a stable, raised surface that could support the weight of people, carts, and goods. The sophistication of its joinery and foundation speaks of generations of accumulated knowledge, a masterclass in bog engineering passed down through skilled artisans. Nearby, the discovery of a simple wooden vessel and the tools of the builders themselves adds a deeply human dimension, a quiet reminder of the individuals whose labor turned this grand vision into a tangible reality. The timing of its construction is profoundly significant. This was an era of regional consolidation in Iron Age Ireland, a time when local chieftaincies were likely coalescing into more powerful, centralized kingdoms. The Corlea Trackway was far more than a convenient passage, it was a powerful political statement. The sheer volume of resources required, the coordinated labor of felling immense oaks and transporting them to the site, points to a leadership with the authority to command such an undertaking. This road was a public demonstration of control, a declaration that a single, powerful will could now unite landscapes that had once been divided. Its excellent preservation within the peat allows us to take its measure with remarkable clarity, offering a rare window into the immense investment of resources and organization that defined this civilization. To walk its reconstructed section today is to stand on the very timber that supported the footsteps of a society at the height of its influence. The Corlea Trackway stands as a perfect case study, a single, well-preserved example that embodies the scale, sophistication, and strategic intent of the entire hidden network. It forces us to ask how this local marvel compares to other, equally ambitious projects scattered across the continent. While the Corlea Trackway represents a peak of Iron Age ambition, the roots of this tradition run far deeper into the past. In the wetlands of Somerset, England, lies a road that predates even the Egyptian pyramids, a ghost of a path known as the Sweet Track. Built around 3,800 years before the Common Era, this is one of the oldest engineered roads ever discovered. It was not a simple footpath, but a raised walkway of carefully split oak planks, laid with precision across a treacherous marsh. The engineering was deliberate and sophisticated, a clear statement that its builders possessed a deep, accumulated knowledge of their environment. This was not a society just beginning to explore the world, but one already shaping it to their will. The track served a clear practical purpose, connecting a raised island of dry land, where a community likely lived, to the valuable resources of the mainland, such as hunting grounds and stands of timber. Yet its design suggests a purpose that transcended the merely practical. The alignment of the Sweet Track is not random. It appears to have been oriented with the rising sun during specific seasonal events. This hints at a profound cosmological layer, where a journey to gather wood or food could also be a ceremonial procession, a walk in step with the cycles of the heavens. Discovered by chance in the 1970s, the track has been a gift to archaeologists, preserved for millennia in the peat that slowly consumed it. The study of its wooden pegs and precisely jointed planks reveals a Neolithic society with advanced woodworking skills, capable of felling massive oaks and shaping them with stone tools into a durable public work. The sheer labor involved, the collective effort of an entire community, points to a highly organized social structure, even at this incredibly early date. The Sweet Track proves that the principles of the submerged causeway were not an Iron Age invention, but a tradition refined over thousands of years. It shows a long-term, consistent pattern of a society investing immense effort to master its wetland world, connecting practical needs with spiritual beliefs in a single, enduring structure. This deep history of adaptation raises a critical question. How did the very climate these builders so brilliantly navigated ultimately shape their destiny? And could a changing world have been the force that finally silenced them? The silent testimony of the peat bogs goes far beyond stone and timber, reaching into the very atmosphere of the past. Paleoclimatology, the study of ancient climates, has uncovered a profound rhythm linking the rise and fall of these causeways to the pulse of the planet itself. Ice cores from distant glaciers and pollen samples preserved in the bog layers reveal that these roads were not built at random. Periods of intensive construction often align with specific climatic windows, particularly warmer, drier intervals when forests of oak and alder flourished, providing the perfect raw materials for ambitious projects. The society's master builders seized these moments of environmental opportunity, harnessing stable conditions to expand their network, but the climate was a partner with two faces. The same data shows that other building phases correlate directly with a shift to much wetter weather, when normally firm ground was transforming into an impassable morass. In these challenging times, the causeways were not a luxury, they were a necessity for survival, a deliberate countermeasure against an encroaching world of water. This reveals a culture of remarkable resilience, one that did not simply retreat from change, but actively engineered solutions to maintain its connections and its power. The abandonment of the network tells an equally compelling story. A significant cooling event or a prolonged period of excessive rainfall could have pushed the environment past a tipping point. The very bogs they had mastered could have expanded uncontrollably, swallowing not just the roads but the farmlands and settlements they connected. When the climate shifted beyond their capacity to adapt, the foundation of their entire society was washed away. This environmental context forces us to see their history not as a solitary human achievement, but as a continuous dialogue with natural forces. Their power was not measured solely in the stones they laid, but in their ability to read the sky and the soil, to build in harmony with the good seasons and endure through the harsh ones. This holistic view, weaving together tree rings and tool marks, invites a deeper question about the people behind these adaptations. How did the constant challenge of their environment shape the very structure of their society, molding their leadership, their daily lives, and their collective identity? The sheer scale of a single submerged causeway speaks of more than just engineering. It whispers of an entire society mobilized for a common purpose: to quarry the stone, transport the timber, and lay a road for kilometers required a workforce numbering in the hundreds, perhaps even the thousands. Such a feat could not be achieved without a clear social structure, a hierarchy where leaders could plan and direct, artisans could apply specialized skills, and a large body of commoners provided the collective muscle. This was not a society of equals in the modern sense, but one organized around shared labor and a unified vision for the landscape they inhabited. The logistics of managing such a workforce were formidable, yet they were accomplished without the use of written records or complex bureaucracy. How did they coordinate it all? The answer likely lies in the rhythm of the seasons and the power of shared tradition. Labor was almost certainly organized around the agricultural calendar, with communities coming together during the quieter periods after the harvest or before the spring planting. This was a time when people were available for large-scale communal projects, turning individual effort into a collective achievement. To motivate and sustain such a large group, the ruling elites likely provided incentives. The evidence suggests that ritual feasts were a common practice, where large quantities of food and drink were shared, transforming back-breaking labor into a social and perhaps even a sacred event. These gatherings would have reinforced community bonds, celebrated shared progress, and legitimized the authority of the organizers. It was a system of social contract, where labor was exchanged for participation in a collective endeavor that benefited everyone, from the leader whose power was solidified to the farmer who gained safer passage to distant fields or markets. This intricate social machine, powered by oral tradition and cultural values rather than written decrees, allowed for the execution of breathtakingly complex projects. The causeway itself becomes a physical record of this cooperation, every stone a testament to a society that understood its strength lay not in isolated individuals, but in its ability to work together toward a monumental goal. This deep-seated value of communal effort and organized defense was not just for creation, however, it was also fundamental for protection, shaping how these communities guarded the world their labor had built. A solid stone path through a bog offers more than just safe passage, it offers control. The deliberate placement of many causeways reveals a strategic mind, one that understood the military value of a hidden highway. These submerged routes often lead directly to the imposing ramparts of a hill fort, the regional power's fortified stronghold. This was no accident. The road acted as a controlled funnel, guiding all movement through a single, easily monitored point. Anyone approaching the settlement, whether a friendly trader or a potential foe, would be forced onto this narrow path, their progress visible to the sentries high on the walls above. The bog itself became a defensive moat, and the causeway was the only drawbridge, one that could be defended by a handful of warriors against a much larger force. This tactical advantage extended beyond the gates of a fortress. Imagine a valuable resource, like a quarry yielding fine stone for tools or a secluded grove used for important gatherings. A hidden causeway leading to such a place would keep its location secret from rival groups, while ensuring that the ruling power could reliably access and transport whatever it needed. In times of open conflict, the strategic value of these roads could be inverted. There is evidence at some sites that causeways were deliberately blocked with felled trees or even partially dismantled, a desperate but effective measure to slow down an invading force that relied on the same hidden paths for its own advance. The very concealment that made the roads so valuable also made them vulnerable to this kind of targeted disruption. This defensive dimension forces us to reconsider the landscape. It was not just a connected territory, but a guarded one. The placement of these causeways in relation to natural barriers like rivers or dense forest edges shows a sophisticated understanding of choke points and territorial control. The regional power was not merely building for prosperity, it was building for security, actively protecting the economic and spiritual assets that formed the foundation of its influence. This intricate network of trade, faith, and defense required a robust economic engine to sustain it, pointing toward a system of wealth and resource management that fueled the entire civilization. The wealth of this regional power was measured not in gold, but in the steady flow of goods moving along its hidden highways. These submerged causeways were the bustling trade routes of their day, facilitating the movement of essential and luxury items that fueled the entire society. Archaeological digs along these ancient paths have uncovered a vibrant economic picture. Shards of finely made pottery, whose distinct clay composition can be traced to sources hundreds of kilometers away, tell a story of long-distance exchange. Fragments of metal, perhaps a bronze axe head or a delicate copper ornament, speak of access to rare ores and the skilled artisans who transformed them. Even the subtle traces of preserved pollen and seeds suggest organized agriculture, with staple foodstuffs like grain being transported from fertile lands to more isolated communities. These roads were the supply lines for a complex economy, moving everything from everyday necessities to symbols of status and power. Control over this network was the ultimate source of influence for the ruling class. They likely held the authority to levy tolls on the goods traveling their roads, effectively taxing the very prosperity they enabled. A trader carrying precious blocks of salt or bundles of finely woven textiles would have had to pay a fee for the privilege of using the safe, reliable causeway. This generated a steady stream of revenue that flowed directly into the hands of the elite. This accumulated wealth did more than just enrich a few individuals. It funded the very institutions that defined their civilization. It supported full-time craft specialists, the master metalworkers and potters whose exquisite creations reinforced the culture's sophistication. It also bankrolled the religious institutions, funding the elaborate ceremonies held at the sacred sites the roads connected. The economic system and the spiritual world were inextricably linked, each one strengthening the other in a powerful cycle. By meticulously mapping the origins of these trade goods, we can begin to reconstruct the astonishing reach of this lost society. A piece of pottery from a distant coast or a style of metalwork unique to another valley acts as a proxy for their political and economic influence. It suggests a web of alliances and trade partnerships that stretched far beyond the immediate boglands. This was not an isolated culture, but a connected hub, a central node in a much wider prehistoric network. The submerged causeways were the local infrastructure that plugged this regional power into the broader currents of ancient Europe. They were the on-ramps to a continental exchange system, allowing not just goods, but also new ideas, technological innovations, and cultural influences to flow into the heartland. This constant influx of external wealth and knowledge would have fueled a cultural golden age, but it also created a deep dependency on the stability of the wider world. What would happen to this carefully balanced system if those distant connections were suddenly severed? A straight causeway points unerringly toward the spot on the horizon where the sun rises on the longest day of the year. This is no coincidence. Many of these submerged roads are precisely aligned with celestial events, from the solstices to the cycles of the moon. For the builders, the cosmos was not a distant abstraction. It was a living map superimposed upon their world. A journey along one of these paths was a physical walk through a celestial calendar, connecting the rhythm of their travels to the grand, predictable motions of the heavens. This alignment served a deeply practical need for navigation, providing a fixed, astronomical reference point in a landscape with few other reliable markers. Yet its purpose ran far deeper than mere direction. These roads likely marked the sacred times for seasonal ceremonies, when processions would travel the causeway at dawn to greet the solstice sun, reaffirming the cosmic order and the community's place within it. The very stones under their feet became a physical manifestation of that order, a permanent inscription of celestial law onto the earthly realm. This cosmological integration profoundly reinforced the authority of the ruling class. By commissioning roads that mirrored the paths of the sun and stars, the leaders demonstrated a privileged connection to the divine forces governing the universe. They positioned themselves as the essential interpreters of this cosmic will, the sole figures who could ensure that human activity remained in harmony with the heavens. Their political power was thus sanctified, woven into the fabric of reality itself. Unraveling these ancient sky maps requires a unique partnership. Archaeologists who carefully excavate the terrestrial evidence must collaborate with archaeoastronomers who calculate ancient sky positions. Together, they decode the silent dialogue between the stones on the ground and the stars above, piecing together how a vanished people perceived their place in the cosmos. This spiritual dimension confirms that the causeways were far more than practical infrastructure. They were sacred landscapes designed for feet and for the spirit, where every journey was both a physical transit and a cosmological event. This cosmic perspective, grand as it is, ultimately brings us back to the human scale, to the individual traveler who walked these roads under the watchful eyes of their gods. A single worn leather shoe, preserved for centuries in the cold, dark peat, speaks more eloquently than any grand stone structure. These small, personal artifacts scattered along the submerged causeways are our most direct connection to the individuals who walked these hidden paths. Each discovery is a frozen moment in time, a tangible echo of a life lived. A child's small footprint pressed into the mud beside a causeway and later sealed by rising water tells a story of a family on the move. A finely carved bone comb dropped and lost hints at personal care and vanity amidst a difficult journey. A broken wooden spindle whorl, the tool used for spinning wool, suggests that even the most mundane tasks of daily life traveled along these routes. These objects transform the causeway from an abstract engineering feat into a lived space, filled with the quiet sounds of footsteps, conversation, and the rustle of travel packs. By studying these items, we can begin to reconstruct the human tapestry of this lost society. The The wear patterns on a shoe sole, for instance, are a biography written in leather. Uneven erosion on one side might suggest a person who walked with a limp, a small detail that speaks to a life of physical hardship and resilience. The type of material used in a piece of jewelry can indicate social standing. A simple pendant made from a local animal bone belonged to a common traveler, while a brooch crafted from imported amber or jet likely adorned someone of wealth and high status, perhaps a chieftain's wife or a priestess on a pilgrimage. The very nature of the items carried reveals the purpose of the journey. A collection of fine metalworking tools found near a causeway points to an itinerant craftsperson taking their skills from one community to another. The remnants of a small, carefully wrapped bundle containing medicinal herbs suggests a healer answering a call for help. These are not just artifacts, they are fragments of personal stories, each one a thread in the larger social and economic fabric. They remind us that the regional power was not a faceless entity, but a collective of individuals with their own destinations, responsibilities, and worries. This intimate focus on the people who used the roads naturally leads us to wonder about their daily lives beyond their journeys, about the strength of their bodies and the challenges they faced from the world around them. The bones themselves hold a final, intimate testimony. Scientific analysis of individuals laid to rest near these ancient causeways opens a window directly into their daily lives, revealing the very substance of their strength and the price of their ambition. Stable isotope studies, which analyze the chemical signatures locked in tooth enamel and bone, tell a story of movement. They can distinguish between someone who lived their entire life on the local, heavy grains and someone whose body chemistry reflects a childhood spent far away, perhaps near the coast. This evidence confirms that these submerged roads were not just for local traffic, they were conduits for long-distance movement, with people traveling significant portions of their lives to reach new communities or to engage in trade. The physical skeleton provides a stark record of their labor. The spines of many individuals show signs of degenerative joint disease and vertebral fractures, the kind of wear and tear associated with a lifetime of carrying heavy loads. Their bones are a ledger of physical stress, likely from the relentless work of quarrying stone, hauling timber, and the back-breaking construction of the very causeways they used. Their dental health offers another clue. A diet rich in coarse stone-ground grain, the staple of an agricultural society, left its mark in severely worn teeth, yet a relative lack of cavities points to a diet low in sugars. This biological data paints a nuanced picture of a society capable of feeding a large population, but one where the common person's life was physically demanding. For some, the evidence is more telling. Signs of healed injuries, like a broken arm that was set and mended, suggest a community that cared for its members. In other cases, evidence of specific nutritional deficiencies might hint at periods of hardship or even social stratification, where the ruling elite had access to a more varied and nutritious diet than the laborers. This holistic view does not diminish their achievements, it humanizes them. It allows us to appreciate the immense collective effort, the human cost in strained backs and worn joints that was invested in building and maintaining their connected world. These were not mythical giants, but people of flesh and blood, whose physical resilience formed the foundation of a regional power. The story of their lives, etched into their very remains, now guides us toward the echoes of their voices, the linguistic clues that might finally tell us what they called themselves. The names of the land itself hold echoes of the builders. While they may not have left written histories, their legacy is encoded in the geography, in ancient words that have stubbornly survived for thousands of years. In Ireland, the word Togha still marks a causeway on the map, a direct linguistic thread leading back to the old Celtic term for a paved way through a bog. This is not a coincidence, it is a form of cultural memory, a whisper passed down through countless generations. Later inscriptions, like those found on Ogham stones, sometimes reference these old pathways, preserving the memory of their importance long after their original purpose was forgotten. These linguistic clues are pieces of a puzzle, allowing researchers to correlate the physical evidence of a submerged road with historical groups mentioned in later chronicles, such as the elusive Cruthin or the powerful Dol Riata. The language tells a story of continuity, suggesting that even as empires rose and fell, the local knowledge of these vital routes never completely vanished from the collective memory. This is a different kind of detective work, one that listens for the faint sounds of a lost language in the names of fields and streams. Each place name becomes a potential coordinate on a much larger historical map, helping to reconstruct the ethnic and linguistic tapestry of the time. It suggests that the power that built the causeways was not a fleeting presence, but a deeply rooted culture whose influence shaped the very words used to describe the land for centuries to come. This linguistic layer adds profound depth to the stones and timber, connecting the engineering to a living, breathing people with their own unique identity. And just as the names of the land offer clues, so too do the objects deliberately left behind in the peat, items that speak not of language, but of a deep and powerful spiritual belief. The quiet offerings left in the bog tell their own story. Alongside the stone and timber, archaeologists have uncovered collections of objects that were clearly placed with purpose. These are not lost items, but deliberate deposits. A prized bronze spearhead, its tip ritually bent, might be found resting near a causeway's edge. Carefully arranged animal bones, often from cattle or sheep, suggest a shared ceremonial meal or an offering to secure the favor of unseen forces. In some places, more personal items are found, marking a final resting place. These deposits were acts of communication, a way for the people to speak with the powers they believed governed their world. The nature of these gifts is profoundly revealing. A broken weapon taken out of circulation speaks to the value of metal and the act of sacrificing something of great worth. Deposits of food signal a concern with fertility and the well-being of the community. The location of these offerings is equally telling. Some were placed during the initial construction, a spiritual foundation laid beneath the physical one, meant to bless the endeavor and ensure the road's permanence and safety. Others were added later, perhaps to mark a significant event, to give thanks for a successful journey, or to seek protection before a difficult crossing. This ritual layer allows us to see the causeway not just as a transport route, but as a sacred corridor. Every journey could be punctuated by these devotional acts, intertwining the practical need to travel with the spiritual need to remain in harmony with the cosmos. For the ruling class, sponsoring these rituals reinforced their role as the essential intermediaries between the people and the divine. The act of giving a valuable object to the bog was a powerful display of wealth and piety, solidifying their authority in both the earthly and spiritual realms. This careful maintenance of cosmic order, however, was not always peaceful. The very objects offered for protection sometimes hint at a world where that protection was desperately needed, pointing toward evidence of a more troubled time when the security of the road was shattered by conflict. The stones themselves sometimes bear scars. Along a few of these ancient causeways, archaeologists have uncovered a darker chapter in their story, where the carefully laid timbers are charred black by fire or show the distinct impact marks of heavy axes. In several locations, the road was not merely abandoned, it was violently torn apart, blocked with felled trees or deliberately dismantled in sections. These are not the marks of decay, but of conflict. They tell us that the control of these hidden highways was so vital it was worth fighting for and worth destroying to deny an enemy. This strategic value made the roads both a lifeline and a target during times of unrest. The evidence suggests that the regional power, for all its sophistication, was not immune to challenges, facing either internal rebellion or pressure from rival groups seeking to control the lucrative trade and movement these routes enabled. Nearby findings add a deeply human dimension to this strife. In the peat close to some causeways, researchers have uncovered the remains of individuals who met a sudden, traumatic end. The nature of their injuries points to organized violence, a stark reminder that these were not peaceful utopias but complex societies, navigating the same human struggles for power and resources that have shaped history everywhere. This contextual evidence helps explain the defensive features integrated into the network's design. The causeways that funneled movement toward hill forts were not just for commerce, they were controlled access points that could be easily defended. The deliberate concealment of the roads within the bog now appears as a form of strategic camouflage, protecting vital infrastructure from outside observation and attack. Understanding this layer of conflict enriches our view of the civilization, moving beyond their engineering genius to reveal the pressures they faced. It suggests that their eventual decline may not have been a single event, but a slow unraveling fueled by a combination of environmental change and social fragmentation, where the very connections that built their power became the arteries of their vulnerability. This tangible proof of past struggles also deepens our connection to the people who walked these paths, reminding us that their world, though distant, was filled with the same tensions between cooperation and conflict that define our own. The urgency to protect and study these fragile sites intensifies with each new discovery, as the quiet evidence of their final days still holds lessons for our future. A perfectly preserved oak plank begins to crumble to dust within hours of being lifted from the protective peat. This heartbreaking race against time defines the modern effort to understand these submerged causeways. The very environment that safeguarded them for millennia becomes their greatest enemy the moment they are exposed to air. To combat this, archaeologists have developed ingenious preservation strategies. One of the most effective is simply reburial, carefully returning the fragile structure to the wet, anoxic conditions that have protected it for centuries. In other cases, delicate wooden artifacts undergo meticulous chemical treatments, slowly replacing the water within their cells with stabilizing compounds like polyethylene glycol, the same substance used to preserve famous shipwrecks like the Vasa. Alongside this physical safeguarding, digital tools offer a new form of immortality. Through high-resolution laser scanning and photogrammetry, every detail of a causeway is captured, creating an exact virtual model that can be studied by researchers across the globe long after the original has been reburied or has deteriorated. These digital twins are more than just backups. They allow us to walk these ancient paths from anywhere, piecing together the broader network one virtual stone at a time. The future of this research shines with even more transformative potential. Imagine extracting ancient DNA from the very wood of the causeway, revealing not just the species of tree used, but the specific forest it was cut from, mapping the resource network with breathtaking precision. Improved radiocarbon dating methods will tighten our timeline, allowing us to see if a road was built in a single concentrated effort or expanded over generations in response to specific events. Broader regional surveys using ever more sensitive airborne LiDAR will finally reveal the full, interconnected web of these routes, showing us the true geographical footprint of this lost power. But this work cannot be done by academics alone. The role of the public has become essential. citizen science projects where local walkers and history enthusiasts report subtle landscape features have led to the discovery of countless new sites. This collaborative spirit, a partnership between professional science and community knowledge, ensures that the search for understanding continues to grow. Every new discovery, every preserved fragment, is a victory against oblivion. These ongoing efforts guarantee that the legacy of the causeway builders will not be lost again, but will instead offer endless opportunities for new generations to connect with this hidden chapter of our shared human story, ensuring their silent roads continue to speak. These sunken roads form a quiet but profound challenge to the way we often view history. We are accustomed to narratives dominated by empires that left behind written decrees and towering stone cities, civilizations whose complexity is measured in their grand monuments and sprawling urban centers. The builders of the causeways achieved something equally sophisticated, yet they did it through a different kind of genius. They forged a regional power not by concentrating people in dense cities, but by weaving a dispersed population together with threads of stone and shared purpose. Their legacy proves that social complexity does not require literacy or urbanization, but can flourish through a deep, collaborative relationship with the land itself. This realization forces us to expand our definition of what makes a civilization advanced. Was it the Romans with their aqueducts and laws, or these master engineers with their hidden, sustainable highways that worked in concert with the bog for thousands of years? The answer is that both are valid, representing divergent paths in the vast story of human organization. By studying their alternative model, we gain a richer, more inclusive understanding of the myriad ways humans have built functioning societies. Their story is a vital counterpoint, a reminder that power can be woven into the landscape rather than stamped upon it, and that a society's true monument can be its infrastructure of connection. This perspective resonates across time and space, inviting us to see parallels with other cultures who thrived through adaptation rather than domination. The silent endurance of their roads asks us to reconsider our own modern priorities, questioning what legacies we are building and whether they are designed to last as long as a stone path laid with care beneath a quiet forest. That quiet collaboration with the landscape holds a powerful lesson for our own time. These ancient builders achieved longevity not by conquering their environment, but by understanding its rhythms and using its own materials. They sourced local timber and stone, minimizing the energy required for transport and creating structures that were inherently part of the ecosystem. When the climate grew wetter, they did not abandon their world. They adapted their infrastructure to manage the change, reinforcing their roads against the rising waters. This sustainable approach stands in stark contrast to modern systems that often prioritize short-term efficiency over long-term resilience, fighting against natural forces rather than working with them. Their success is a quiet argument for building with the grain of the planet, not against it. Beyond environmental wisdom, the causeways are a timeless reminder of infrastructure's true purpose: to connect. They were not built for solitary grandeur, but to weave scattered communities into a cohesive whole, enabling the flow of goods, ideas, and shared identity. In an age where digital networks can sometimes isolate us as much as they connect, the physical solidarity of these stone paths speaks volumes. They fostered a regional culture where distant villages were linked by common projects and collective rituals, proving that a society's strength is measured by the quality of its bonds. The eventual silence that fell over this network invites a humbling reflection. A society that commanded such resources and organized such complex projects could still fade from memory, its grandest achievements slowly swallowed by the earth. This is not a story of failure, but a profound reminder of the transience of human power. It challenges our own assumptions of permanence, asking us to consider what traces of our modern world will endure and what stories they might tell to those who come after us. Exploring these submerged roads, then, is far more than an archaeological exercise. It is a conversation across centuries, offering a source of wisdom about sustainable living, the vital importance of connection, and the quiet humility we can learn from those who walked before us. The stones have spoken, and their story is one of profound integration. These submerged causeways were far more than simple roads. They were the very lifelines of a sophisticated regional power. A civilization that understood its strength lay in weaving together the practical, the spiritual, and the economic into a single, harmonious whole. From the wide geographical spread of these hidden routes to their deep symbolic alignment with the cosmos, every clue has revealed a society that mastered its environment through collaboration rather than conquest. They left a legacy not in grand palaces, but in the quiet, enduring logic of the landscape itself. This journey reminds us that history is written not only in texts and monuments, but in the very ground we walk upon, in the forgotten infrastructures that once connected a world. The next time you walk through a quiet forest or a misty field, pause for a moment and look closer. The subtle ridge underfoot, the local name of a lane, these too might hold fragments of a hidden history waiting to be rediscovered. Perhaps you will even feel drawn to walk the preserved paths of Corlea or sense the ancient presence along the sweet track yourself. We would love to hear which aspect of this lost world fascinated you most. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into historical mysteries, subscribe for more adventures into the past. Thank you for joining this exploration.